And then like he then talks about the kinds of preaching that can take place in verses 15 to 18, and we've sort of already referenced that a little bit, but I just think it's really important that we stop and consider what is he saying here. He's saying that motive matters when you're sharing the gospel. So he's obviously really passionate about that, really passionate about.
He's also saying motive doesn't matter.
Yeah,
That's
literally what I had.
Explain yourself.
That's what he says.
That's what it says. So, when it talks about here, verse 15, some indeed preach Christ even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains, but the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice. So he's saying, yes, it does matter from the person's perspective, right? Like there, you can't, preach the gospel to get points. You have to have it with a pure motives yourself. But from Paul's perspective, he's saying, I don't care. I am stoked that they're preaching it, whether they are preaching it for good reasons or bad reasons. Yeah. So it doesn't matter from Paul's perspective, but it does matter from their perspective salvifically.
I guess
Thank you for that.
I guess it ultimately comes down to how they're portraying.
I'm arguing your point. What am I doing?
I think it comes down to how you portray Christ, whether you're making him look not like his character or getting his character correct. I think that's what's actually important when it comes to the preaching of the gospel. But it's interesting that he points that out, because you would think that it would matter a lot more, because if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, does that mean that that person is 100% portraying the Christian walk real well? That being said, do we do it when we have the purest of motives?
Yeah, well, that's what I was just about to say. But where do you stop splitting hairs? Because, I'm sure we can all relate to getting up to preach and recognizing that I'm not a perfect person, and I'm about to preach this message, and I don't have this all together. And so, if you want to split hairs far enough, you could say, oh, well, that's the same thing. And so at some point we have to acknowledge that, it's okay that Jesus. When I say it's okay, what I mean is that Jesus is able to utilize broken vessels to share the message.
I think that's not necessarily the best interpretation of the word preach in the New Testament context. I understand your illustration is still perfectly relevant, but yes. I just wanted to make that clear. I think when they think preach, they think proclaim in any form. It doesn't necessarily mean from a pulpit. So just want to clear that up.
Yeah, that's fair.
I also think maybe we're missing the point. I think maybe what he was actually getting at is, at whatever stage in your journey you're at, present Christ. But
yeah, definitely.
I don't think he's actually saying that. Preaching Christ in envy and strife is as good as preaching Christ, from a selfless perspective. So, yeah, I think maybe more the point is, don't wait to be perfect to share Jesus.
Because you won't be preaching in this lifetime.
Right.
No, I agree theologically, but I don't think that's what he's saying. I think that the point that he's making is more the point that Ben was making before, in that, yes, it is true that there are people preaching the wrong thing, but that's not my chief concern, because ultimately the message is being preached. I think that's his point. I don't think he's making any real commentary on the spiritual condition of those people. I think he's making the assumption that everyone knows that preaching intentionally with bad motives, that you're out of harmony with God, and I don't think that's in question. But I don't think I'm saying anything you disagree with. Where am I?
Yeah, but that's okay.
Oh, that's good.
We don't have to agree.
I'm always stoked when I find something that we disagree about. This is good.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go on. Unless someone has something else to say around these verses where we're at, because we're good.
Shall we move on to 19?
Yeah, let's do it.
For I know that this shall turn to my salvation through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and my hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labour, yet what I shall choose I won't not. For I am in the strait between two, Having desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better, nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. And having this confidence, I know I shall abide and continue with you for your furtherance and joy of faith.
Is that where your section ends?
Oh, it just keeps going and going. I just figured.
Oh, for me, I've got verse 26 is the end of like that section. I was just curious if it was the same.
Okay. That your rejoicing may be more abundant in Jesus Christ for me by my coming to you again. Yeah, that makes more sense to conclude it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So there's a tension that he's sharing here, right?
Mm.
You know, the tension of living through suffering and having greater opportunity to share the gospel versus, you know, just the suffering coming to an end and getting to you know, be with Jesus sooner. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting the motivation that he projects in this passage, right? So because he's like, you know, one of them is obviously far better for me, but for your sake, I'm happy to go on. Yeah, which is, I think, is instructive for us in you know, less vital situations, right? Where
we're not always in his shoes, right?
Yeah, we might not be, you know, the tension might not be between life and death. It might be between sacrificing something that we don't want to give up.
Yeah.
You know, whether it might be going through a bit of financial hardship for a time in order to benefit somebody else, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, the sacrifice that God's calling you to make. Yeah, and Paul's attitude would be, I'm willing to go through that for the sake of helping out my, you know, fellow pilgrims.
Yeah.
Well, this being at the near the end of time, another interesting thing that's kind of resonates with this is the idea that instead of praying for the soon coming of Christ, we should be praying for more time so that more souls might be saved. What are your thoughts on that prayer? Because often we're encouraged to actually pray for Christ to come sooner rather than to put it back so that we have more time.
Well, that thinking, it would never come.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is a popular or an unpopular opinion, but as far as that goes, I think that there is a peak of any harvest, right? Like, you know, where any part of the crop that can be collected will be collected, right? There's a point where anything that's going to ripen is going to be ripe, and I think that's the place that Christ is looking for. Like that's going to be where this income happens. I don't think there's going to be people like, when we get to whatever that point of time is, I don't think, if we had waited 5 more minutes, you know, there would have been another person saved. I don't think we're going to get to that point, because then I really do think that, you know, if there was just one person in the city, right? Think Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, you know, if there were just 10, you know, good men, then I'm not going to destroy the city. I think it's going to be the same. I think God is going to draw it out until anybody who is going to make that decision is going to make that decision. And I think that the circumstances around that, you know, what we believe in our eschatology about what happens at the end of time, I think that will accelerate that, right? So there's that polarization of the people who have made the decisions. But as far as how long before that time happens, which is I think what you're getting at, Ben, yeah, I'm of the mind that we should be planning for more, like, so we can do the maximum good with our lives here on the earth. Yeah.
Can you just summarize what was your answer to the question?
Yes.
Because that was really unclear to me.
I forgot what the question was.
The question was whether we should be praying for more
yes.
time or not. Because it sounded like you were saying we should be ambivalent about time. We should just be like, you know, praying for opportunities while we're still here.
Yeah, I think there is. Depends how you cut it, right? Because I think we should be ambivalent about time to the extent that we are not making the same mistake that, you know, the people did during the Second Advent Awakening, right? We're not saying, Jesus is coming soon, and so we're cutting ties early, so to speak. But at the same time, we need to be recognizing that he is coming soon, and so there is a degree that we are waiting for that to happen, and we can't wait for that to happen. But I don't think, like, let me put this into more reasonable terms, something that we would hear on a more regular basis. How many times have you heard people say, you know, look at this bad stuff that's happening in the world. Like, I hope it speeds up because, you know, I want to go home. Like, I want Jesus to come back. right? I think that thinking is flawed. Selfishly, I think, yeah, that makes sense. Because there have been times where I've looked at times where things haven't been going great in my life and thinking, man, just wish Jesus had come back and just this would be done. But I think, just like Paul's conclusion, it's better for it to go on, for now at least, because there's still opportunity, right? There's still hearts that haven't heard the message yet. There's still good that we can do as individuals. So yes, I think that is Paul's model, and I think we should take it until we are at the end.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's fine. I want to point out it is possible to pray that prayer without being selfish. You know, like, because I think it's a positive thing to be desiring a resolution to the sin problem. I think that's definitely where God's heart is at.
Yeah.
But yeah, the motivation you just spoke of is like it's purely like about me and wanting to be
tap out.
So I think our perspective should be one of wanting resolution, but wanting to work while we still have time to work, which I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, we agree.
I was thinking that.
Can I read the last part?
Please.
Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. This microphone's in the way. And not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of petition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. For to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here is in me. I really, really appreciate the wording of verse 27. Let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. So he's just spoken of this tension between wanting to be present with them and wanting to be taken, to be with the Lord sooner. And he has concluded, in that tension, that from his perspective, it's in their best interest, in the world's best interest, that he stays. And so he's content to stay, even though, to die to him is gain. And then he says, only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. And I think like this is kind of like somewhat of a conclusion to what he's been saying, what he's been praying for the church, that they would have this, this love that's founded on understanding, and then that would bring out of them the fruit of righteousness, and then they're preaching the gospel, and then there's this sort of this experience of just desiring others above self, and then he sort of concludes by saying, let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. What does that bring to mind for you guys? What does it mean to have conduct worthy of the gospel?
Word that comes to mind for me is reputation. Do you have the reputation of being a good person? And it's not to say that we're earning points by doing that, but what I'm meaning is if we represent the gospel well to people, that is going to make a dramatic difference in how the people receive the gospel.
Yeah, they want to know that it's this good thing, and if we make the gospel out to be this dark, evil thing through hypocrisy, then people will be put off by it, and our lives won't be a magnet to bring people towards God. That'll repel people.
Right. Well, spoiler alert, he answers that question in chapter 2. What does it mean to have a life worthy of the gospel of Christ? So... looking forward to it.
Yeah, that'll be next episode. That was a really nice built-in teaser right there, Dave. Look at that smug look on his face. It's like, I know.
I'm a pro.
Whatever. I also like how he puts a little nugget in there, though, to answer the question already. Stand fast in one spirit with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. So part of what it means to have conduct worthy of the gospel of Christ is unity.
Yeah.
And also, in addition to that, the very next verse, and not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. Basically, don't let your oppressors intimidate you. And I think if people are, some people find appealing to have the Christian doormat idea, just that we should be submissive and not worry about it. Whereas Paul's saying, no, if someone's intimidating you and you're in Christ and this is, stand up, be counted. Don't become the Christian doormat. And I think that's obviously some people could misinterpret that, but I think Paul's point here is that we shouldn't be ashamed of who we are in Christ. We shouldn't be ashamed of the message. In fact, we should be holding that up as who we are. But in order for that to make sense,
That's part of our proclamation, he's saying too, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. But
Because if we're not, he says it's proof of perdition.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But what we just read before in verse 27, that we should be letting our conduct be worthy of the gospel. That is what's the word I'm looking for? Verse 27 is what qualifies us to do verse 28. So if our conduct is good, then we can stand up for the gospel, so to speak. We can, not let others intimidate us about it because we have that good reputation. We're beyond reproach in the public setting. Whereas if we were living a life that people don't find any value in, then if we stand up for the gospel, that's going to seem like, well, why should I listen to them anyway? They cheat on their taxes or, whatever it may be. That was one for you there. Yeah, but they cheat on their taxes or whatever it is. But if we're seen to not be honest, upstanding people, and then we try to stand up for the gospel, then that will reflect badly on what we're teaching. So,
unless you guys have got anything else, I want to throw one last challenge.
Go for it.
Verses 29 and 30. For you it has been granted on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me and now here is in me. I think I want to just put the question out there to everybody listening, and to us here at the table. What's the sacrifice the suffering that that God is calling us to make on behalf of Christ? What is it that we need to give up, or what is it that we need to lay aside, to use the language of chapter 2, in order that we can be living lives or having conduct that's worthy of the gospel of Christ? Yeah. So, not asking you to answer that question live, but something for us to think about, right?
Yeah. Very good. Well, I think that's a good spot for us to leave this one. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. And if you've enjoyed this format of where we're just going deep into the text, please let us know. We'd love to get more feedback from you guys. And we look forward to catching you for the next chapter as we go into chapter 2, the next episode. See you guys.